Hi everyone, this is Mojdeh from Persian Awards. I'm here today with a dear member of Provincial Parliament, Laura Mo Lindo, Dr. Lindo. Thank you for accepting our invitation, Doctor. Welcome to Persian Awards. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So I am Laura Mae Lindo. I am the member of Provincial Parliament for Kitchener Centre, the official opposition critic for colleges and universities, as well as anti-racism, and the very proud chair of the Ontario NDP's Black Caucus. Super excited to be here.
Great, thank you so much. My first question from you is, what do you think as a politician person is the importance of role of art and culture in the society?
Wow, that is a brilliant starting point. I think a lot of people believe that arts and culture don't require investment or don't have big value in the world. But the reality is, a lot of change happens through the arts and through cultural organizing. And a lot of protection and support comes through the arts and cultural organizing. Many people don't know this, but many moons ago, I was a professional musician. So I used to sing with the Samba Squad in Toronto, was doing tours with groups like Diego, Mariolanda, and Pacande, and spent a lot of time in the art scene, sort of center in the art scene. And the amount of support and care that goes through the arts, through music, through visual arts, through performance arts, especially when community issues arise. So when you have like something horrible that happens in the news, people turn to the arts for that kind of support. So for me, it is central. And I think it's something that we have to always be pushing for investment in and make sure it's accessible to our younger generations so that they have something to hold on to.
Great. So you've been as a musician. So like you were close to this kind of like art and music. And so now you can say that how you as a politician person now can support this art and culture. What do you think?
I think it's really important for us to be fighting for ongoing investments and sustainable investments in the arts. So, one of the things that I've seen, not just for myself, but my kids are very artistic. They're very involved in visual arts in town, in my area. But one of the things that I've realized is that access to the arts has provided me personally with. Um, Examples or opportunities to develop public speaking skills, to get accustomed to being in front of larger crowds, to find creative ways to solve problems. But from an older generation that had access to music and visual arts and theater and drama programs in both English and in French. In school. And I look at what's happening with my little ones now. Some of those programs have been cut. A lot of schools being under the gun financially have left them having to grapple with what programs can stay and what can't. And so I think it's really important for us to be fighting to ensure that there's provincial investments in the arts for the younger generation so that they too have access to that kind of I used to call it incidental learning. You don't realize the kinds of soft skills that you achieve when you're part of the arts and part of artistic programs, and so you may not see it as a direct link. But my artist friends are able to pivot in hard times. They're able to think creatively. They're able to find more healthier ways to navigate stress and anxiety because they have access to this artistic outlet. And I think that we have to be pushing the government to invest in those things and see that as upstream supports for young generations and for older generations. Like there's a load of research on the importance of arts to help older adults, right? When people are aging, they turn to the arts and to cultural organizations for support as they get older. And so we've got to make sure that that wraparound support's available for everybody. And as a member of provincial parliament, part of for me, that means advocating with the province to make sure that there's a clear understanding that this is an investment that we need, and the return on investment is truly a major mover to ensure that we do that investment provincially.
So that's a great news to know that you, as a politician person and as a musician, you used to be a musician, so you work close to this art and culture. You're pushing, and you want to everybody in the government knows that the importance of the art and culture. In your opinion, what is the connection between, like, how the art and culture can connect between citizen, immigrants, and newcomers? What is the role?
So that your questions are fantastic. That's another really good question. A lot of newcomers, at least that I have worked with, at one point I had the critic portfolio for citizenship and immigration, and my own research was in anti-racist organizing in various spaces. And so over the years, what I've realized is that a lot of newcomers have a really strong connection to the arts back home. And so when they come here and they're having to start from scratch in a new space, it's the arts and the artistic connections that they had that help to hold them and make them feel okay about navigating this brand new life that they have to build. So as a starting point, I think that that's truly important for them to to recognize that connection. But I also think that there is the use of the arts has been something that a lot of people have used to push back against injustice in various places across the globe. And so another really important connection for people to recognize is that oftentimes the arts is a different way to speak back against systems that are harmful to people without having to use regular words, right? So you can make a play and not have any words involved in that and still evoke the emotions to make people know that somebody is in need of support. You can do the same thing with music. You don't have to understand the language to be able to understand the energy of that song that says somebody needs to be loved and cared for. And so there's power in the artistic expression, and there's a particular kind of power, I think, for newcomers when they have access to the arts and they're able to communicate with people and find connections with community that don't involve them having to, in our case, speak English, right? Or in some communities, speak French. They can come in and there's a starting point for us to build together and feel connected through the arts. And I think that's something that often gets downplayed from the political side. But my own connection to the arts, I know that that's a saving grace for so many people, including in my own family. My dad, actually, just as an aside, my daddy has early onset dementia. He's 82. And so I remember the last time before COVID that we were able to see him for Christmas dinner. He's been struggling quite a lot, and for those that know about dementia, there's sort of ups and downs in the whole process for folks. But he got into the house and saw the piano and sat down at the piano, and all of a sudden it was like for a small period in time we had daddy back. He loved it and he could reconnect. And so again, there's so many different ways that the arts are powerful for people, a powerful communicator when a lot of other things don't allow you to communicate. And I don't think that we can ignore the importance of that for folks.
Great. This is Mojdeh in Persian Awards. We are with Dr. Lindo from Ontario. Thank you. It was really kind words about art, especially when you're talking from your heart and you had this experience. It shows that the passion, and it just gives hope to all of the immigrants and newcomers that there is a connection, there is something. So great. Thank you. So in your opinion, how they can, like the immigrants and newcomers, when they come into new country, as you mentioned, they're bringing art and culture with themselves, and they want to grow. They wanted to have the same opportunity in the new country that is going to be their country. How they can grow? What is the steps that they need to be done?
I'm going to take a step back from that question because I think that there's a lot that the province should be doing to ensure that the push or advocacy for access to the arts for newcomers isn't just done by newcomers. Like I think that there has to be an understanding. There are certain pockets of the province that have a high number of newcomers that arrive. So a lot of people will come into Toronto. And they'll also come into Waterloo region, which is where I am, right? I think it's really important for us before we have folks here to push for the government to invest in settlement services that also include access to the arts. So oftentimes the settlement services that we push for are English language, and sometimes childcare so that people can do English language classes. But I think that if we understood the arts as a communication tool for newcomers, then we would be fighting for the arts and access to the arts for newcomers as well. And that would help for them to better settle, have a high quality of settlement wherever it is that they decide to go. So I think that there's stuff that we can do that are already here. For newcomers, though, I think asking for those services is a really smart thing to do because people often, when it comes to settlement services that are available, not everybody would think about asking for an arts program. And the reality is that a lot of settlements providers know the power of the arts and have been doing things like trying to get grants and funding for art programs that would come to wherever folks start their settlement
Mhm,
journey
mhm.
here. And so if you ask for it, then the service providers know that they are on to something good, right? And so they'll keep pushing for more funding. And then for people like me that are on the outside of that, but in these positions of influence, as a member of provincial parliament, I can back up your call for those programs and keep pushing to ensure that those are invested in. But I do think that thinking about the arts as a new way of communicating, like a different way of communicating, and that provides newcomers with some kind of grounding, and also recognizes the expertise that they bring into Ontario, right? Because they'll have a stronger understanding of the arts back home that they're
Mhm.
bringing here than we would have. Imagining what that looks like. So I think that there's loads of positive reasons why we should be fighting for that, but I don't think it should lay just solely on the shoulders of newcomers.
So in your opinion, there is a lot of like fund that the government can put in for art as a new communication skills because it doesn't need any language. So you don't need to know the language. You can just feel it. Even you mentioned in a music,
Yeah,
if there is any music to ask for help without knowing the language, you can feel it. So there is lots.
definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. There's also there's a really big world music for, like, I'm staying on music just because of my background, but there is a really big world music community in Ontario that people don't talk about, that often struggle for funding to be able to do tours or produce albums and that kind of stuff, and also visual arts, the same kind of thing. And I've seen a lot of theater companies, independent theater companies that are talking about newcomer and immigrant experiences on this land. And they try and do a lot of work to connect newcomers to the history of Indigenous communities and colonization on this land as well and across Turtle Island. So there are all these pockets of really innovative artistic spaces that where newcomers have been able to build that, but they aren't necessarily connected to the new group of newcomers that come in. And so that's where I see there's work that we can do to make that bridge stronger for folks. And there's a valid reason to be able to do it because being able to communicate is one of the first things that makes you feel safe in a new space. So we know that there's value. But the challenge currently is that I don't believe that there is sufficient investment in settlement services as it is in this province. And so, what I do think is that if we, as a collective, so not just the newcomers that come in or their families, but collectively, if we see the value of newcomers and healthy settlement in our communities, and we push for the government to invest in those settlement services, then we also have to put into the universe what it is that we want them to invest in. So if you just ask them to invest in settlement services, you'll have a couple more English language classes. But if we're strategic in what we ask for and we say, no, we also need other modes of communication, including the arts. So theater, access to visual arts, access to music therapy, even the healing arts, the way that that comes in, and art therapy, and ensuring that we have access to all of those kinds of things for settlement purposes, then we can expand the way that the government thinks about healthy settlement. And I'm here for all of that. So people can reach out to me and I would be more than willing to write and advocate, because I think that's important for us to do that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's the international language to talk and
Yeah.
show the feeling. We go to the next level, Dr. Lindo. It's about scientific and academic part. There's a lot of new immigrants, or even they've been born here and they want to continue their education. But for newcomers and immigrants, when they come and they want to continue their education in master PhD, after that they want to grow, they want to have a role in this part, like academic and scientific part. What is exactly how they can do it, how they can just contribute in this field.
Another really important question. So again, people may not know this, but my background is actually in education. So I've got my master's and PhD in education. And one of my critic portfolios is colleges and universities. And so I've been doing a lot of investigating. Prior to being elected, I was doing a lot of work with international students that were coming in. And so there were already barriers to international students bridging their education from back home and their educational aspirations here. There were a lot of people that had come here to start a new life, and the credits and degrees and programs that they had done at home weren't considered valid here, and they were starting from scratch, which I think as a starting point, we have to do better in Ontario to assess the degrees that folks have from across the globe when they decide to settle in Ontario, because we're missing out. And with a pandemic, if we think about what happened during the pandemic, we've got a nursing shortage, we've got a shortage of family doctors across the province, and yet we've got people that have come from a variety of places that were doctors at home and are taxi cab drivers in Ontario. I've spoken to many, to be honest, which is part of why I raise that as an actual example of what has been happening. And my office had people calling saying, like, we want to be on the front lines to help with COVID, but there were barriers upon barriers to have them do that work. So there's things that we can do just as a starting point. But for those that have navigated all those barriers and now successfully get a degree here and are still facing other barriers to be part of the academic community, I think that's where we have to take a deep breath and recognize that racism is alive and well in our post-secondary system in Ontario. And so one of the big advocacy pieces that I am doing is to address racism within academic spaces. And so I'm quite vocal about that. As a Black woman I'm first generation Canadian, my parents are from Jamaica. And my mummy was 16 when she had done like a university level courses in Jamaica, because their school system is so different, and got here. And none of that was recognized. And actually, she ended up graduating from York University at 79. Though we say 36 because I want her to love me, but she was 79 when she graduated just a couple years ago. And so when you think about that, like, that's so many years of contributing to the province, but only being able to be part of what she really imagined herself being able to do at the later years of her life. That's not fair. And so there's something that we have to do to advocate. And so again, those are the examples that we have. We often feel like we're the only one who's experiencing those kinds of blocks in post-secondary, but you are not alone. And I think that part of what we have to do is start speaking about what those barriers look like, so that for somebody like me who's doing the advocacy inside the system, I can use those examples and say, no, let's connect the dots, because there's clearly a barrier, or somebody who didn't believe that, awarding that degree to this person who looked like this or came from this country was the same degree as somebody else who was from Canada or from Ontario, right?
That's like you jump to my next question by giving me the example, like the importance of sharing the experience. How, like, because in your opinion, when you said that, even about the taxi driver, that there is some doctors that they are driving taxi in Ontario, and you've spoken with them. So sharing this experience, in your opinion, is it kind of like helping people to know and just find the path that they need to go?
Yeah, so I think there's two different pieces of it. I think there's a personal piece that can happen when you share those experiences, then others are able to say you're not the only one. Because part of what happens when you experience racism or discrimination of any kind in these systems, you think you're the only one. And discrimination thrives on you feeling like you're alone, right? And
Mhm.
so it helps you, I believe that it helps or it can help to know that you're not the only one that experienced that and that it might not be you. Because the other piece is when you're applying to a bunch of jobs and you're getting denied jobs, you start to think that it's something that you haven't done. One of the pieces of research that I find so fascinating is that a lot of racialized people have way more degrees than white Canadians do to do the exact same jobs. And part of why that happens is because we're often told by the system that we have to do better than everyone else. So, you know, we get denied the job 5 times, so we go and get another degree. So you'll hear a lot of newcomers that will say, I've got 2 master's degrees, I'm working on a second PhD, I have 3 undergrad degrees. Like regular Ontarians don't do that. They do 1 undergrad, then maybe a master's, and potentially with a master's, they're good to go. Right. And so I think that that's, again, a sign of that system. So I think there's something that just lets you breathe a little bit to say, okay, I'm not by myself, which means I have a community that can advocate for change. But the flip side of it is that there's a possibility for us to recognize what the barriers look like because they look different for different people. So what a racialized woman might experience in science, for instance, will be different than what a racialized woman might experience um, in any other field, like in the arts, for instance. There's different kinds of experiences that you would have. So we can connect the dots with what the barriers look like in various disciplines in the academic world, but we can also connect the dots when it comes to an Indigenous person in the academic world will have a very different experience than a Black person, than another racialized person. And a lot of that has nothing to do with how you identify. It has to do with how the system reads you when you go into that place, right? So I
Yeah.
do think that there's a lot of speaking out about it is important when
Mhm.
you can, because the other piece, the reality is it's hard. And sometimes you don't want to talk about it. And so take your time, but know that there are advocates outside collecting those stories and trying to make the change within the academic world for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. As you said, that it's good to know that there is a lot of people that they are willing to help you and listen to you, even
Yeah.
you talk, right?
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, as a politician person, Dr. Lindo, what is the importance of the role of culture, art, or any kind of awards like Persian awards to empower the culture and art and to show globally the kind of like art and culture activities and empower it?
Um, the it is so integral to the fabric and the kinds of communities that we're trying to create to have these kinds of awards programs. I never used to realize, like when I was younger, I didn't realize how important they were. But there is, when you're experiencing different kinds of issues and oppression or discrimination in the broader world, to know that your community sees you and values what you contribute is huge. For some people, that is a lifesaver, right? To be able to hold on to that award or even the nomination for an award and know that somebody in the world saw you and believes in you. That's huge. So I think that for me, that's of the greatest importance and the greatest value. But there are other big things that awards programs like this have. And so some of it is, again, legitimizing the fight for investment in the arts comes with having these kinds of awards that are available. For individual artists, being able to list awards that they've been nominated for and received. And I say nominated for because you don't have to win every award to be able to use the sort of the power that award nomination has granted you to be able to get other grants. But they can list that on CVs and on resumes and on websites and in their blogs and all of these different places to be able to access bigger heights and more communities to see their work, right? I just think it's so, so very important. And in a world where the arts, some would argue the arts are under attack, that they're not being invested in, and that especially right now with a pandemic and a blow to our economy, the first thing to go were the arts and art programs. We need to keep pushing for the importance of the arts, and awards programs like the Persian Awards allow us to do that because it recognizes the power of the arts and provides a platform for us to share the kinds of arts that are being done in our communities. So I am very, very grateful to the Persian Awards for doing the work that you do in community.
Great. This is Mojdeh, and we are with Dr. Lindo in Persian Awards. Thank you, Dr. Lindo. My question now is about us who working in Persian Awards. We are volunteering and we are working to empower the art and culture, to introduce the Persian art and culture. And do you think, in your opinion, as a politician person, that we could be a good feedback to empower and introduce Persian art and culture?
Oh, for sure. I think that this is the perfect place to empower people and to introduce Persian arts into the world. And even as the art and the artistic expression amongst the community shifts, right? Because that's the thing about the arts, is that it's in response to. Like, we don't just do art for no reason. It's usually in response to something that's happened, whether it's positive or not, or hard or easy, it doesn't matter, joyful or sad. Our artistic expression is often in response to something. And so it shifts. And as people live in different areas with different people, the ways that we do our art shifts. And so volunteers like yourselves, like the group around the Persian Awards, provide a space to bring some of that in and demonstrate that, like the shift in different artistic mediums over time. The different types of people that are doing the arts now and what their stories are. The arts is one of the only places where you get to hear the origin story of a person who's bringing that art in. Oftentimes the art's just there willy-nilly and you don't get to know why it happened, right?
Yeah.
So you provide this space to be able to do that. I think it's hugely important. The most important piece for me, at least, is that when political systems don't invest, for instance, in the arts in school, it's groups like you, like the Persian Awards and volunteers in the Persian Awards, that provide access to the arts to young people, that create a space for younger generations to share their art, and to talk about it and be empowered and recognize that they have a voice, they have a creative way of communicating everything that they need, and it's valued and it's being seen. So I think that it's hugely, hugely, hugely important. And again, I'm so grateful for the work that all of the volunteers are doing.
Great. Thank you so much. That was kind of like a motivation more and more for us to empower the art and culture in Persian Awards. And you said something that I wanted to highlight that if even you are nominated in any awards, you can use it because it's a recognition. So It doesn't matter if you win the awards or not. If you are nominated, that's a great opportunity to show. So my next question is about the funding. So what kind of like a fund do you think that art and culture activities, like there is some people that they have financially, they can support better, they can invest in art and culture. What kind of fund do you think is available to empower the art and culture in the society?
So there are a number of arts funds that have been developed through the province, through municipalities as well, and through the federal government. The unfortunate reality is that prior to the pandemic, there were already some cuts to a lot of those funding programs. And I would argue there were particular cuts to the cultural focused arts programs. So anything that was about the newcomers or racialized folks or anything like that, Indigenous Arts Fund, they were getting cut before the pandemic. And now, with the pandemic and us trying to rebuild the economy, there's a big push to get that funding, not just to get it back to where it was, because it was already, we were underfunding the
Mhm.
arts, but to understand that arts and culture are economic drivers. And so, if we want to rebuild the economy post pandemic, we've got to invest in the arts, period. When you think about what happens when you have a festival, and the fact that you can have a large festival that brings different types of arts together. So you've got artisans that are selling their wares. You've got folks that are selling, natural healing products or, lotions and that kind of stuff. You've got people that are selling clothing and that kind of thing that's happening there. And you've got visual arts, and you've got musical groups, and you bring in international artists. Like those types of community organizations that build those kinds of creative spaces in town, um, they bring loads of money to the region and across the province. And so I do believe that artistic communities during the first wave of the pandemic did an amazing job of fighting for investment in the arts. And so we're starting to hear the provincial government say that they're going to have a little bit of extra funding here and a little bit of extra funding there.
Mhm.
Where my concern is, as a member of the official opposition, is that the same bigger projects will get funded, but the smaller programs might get lost. And so I think that it's, again, important for us to advocate for the value of these smaller programs that
Mhm.
may have been overlooked in the past, but we can't overlook now, because those are the ones that are going to hold our community, especially during difficult times. And so fighting for some of that is important. I just think that it's not enough to just fight for the old programs and funding models, because oftentimes there wouldn't have been enough money, or an understanding of the value of something like the Persian Awards, for instance, to give money to that program, which is why you end up with a lot of really, really amazing and powerful volunteers, but you're never able to take the next step where you've got, that solid commitment and know every year that you're ready to go.
Mhm.
And I think that there has to be value on that. And right now, while we're in these regional pockets trying to navigate the last bit of COVID, we're hoping now is the time to make sure that we've got funding that goes to these organizations, because they're holding communities that have honestly been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's really important for us to make that link. And you can't talk about economic recovery without talking about investments in the arts and culture. I don't think that it's possible for us to do that.
That's good. So it's just the lesson from pandemic that if you invest in art and culture, that means you're investing in the economy. That's what you said. So
That's
yeah.
exactly it.
In your opinion, what is the role of local media? In nowadays, the social media, there's a lot of like kind of connection, but local media, there is something that is, in your opinion, I want to know your opinion as a politician person. What is their role to show, introduce, and empower different art and culture? I'm not talking only about the Persian art and culture, like at different communities. What is their
Oh,
role?
that is the role of local media is beyond words, to be honest, because usually local media is written and developed, the stories and such are developed by local artists and local people that are connected to those artists, right? And for me, writing is also an art. And so again, I think that it depends on how we see the arts, and that we have to be um, clear, right? About who we are involving in that. But for me, that endeavor is hugely important because mainstream media often has sort of higher level stories that lose these more intimate examples of what has held people when they needed support and what they have done. Those stories may not make it into mainstream media, but local media outlets will talk about that because they'll be aware of certain communities and who's living in those communities and what they were drawn to in order to survive something that was difficult, or what they were drawn to in order to provide better supports around their children. And oftentimes that's where you start to talk about the types of arts programming that's happening, often with volunteers, often with newcomers that will open up spaces to do this kind of work, or with artists that were at some point in their own story a newcomer to this land and had been able to develop something and they want to give back to community because they see the power of the arts. Local media is what grabs onto those stories, and holds them in the, I always say, the cockles of history in Ontario, where other people aren't holding on to those stories, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's hugely, hugely important. And they also are not getting the kind of funding that they used to get. So we're seeing these smaller media outlets disappear, the local media outlets disappear. And we can't afford to have that happen because we're not going to get a full picture of what's happening in our communities if we let go of the people that are closest to the ground in those communities trying to keep those stories alive.
So local media is going to get all the information, all the what's happening in the province and show to everyone and empower the art and culture. So that's
Yeah.
another part that there is a hope to invest more to get better economy, I can say. So my last question from you, Dr. Lindo, is what do you think? What steps should be done, in your opinion, as a politician person, to encourage production company to produce more art and culture activities?
So again, that's a really good question. I think that um, it's difficult to answer that without taking seriously the place that we are in with the pandemic and the impact on the economy. And the reason I say that as a starting point to answer the question is because now is the time that we rebuild, and a lot of production companies are going to be part of that rebuilding. And part of why they'll be part of that rebuilding is because when you have something as major as a global pandemic, the sort of the more nuanced stories of how that has actually impacted people are going to be the things that get produced by the production companies, right?
Yes,
Because
yes.
they're going to want to tell those stories. So I think it's important for us to recognize, again, if your starting point is the arts are a really powerful communication tool, and that they can also be a very powerful driver of the rebuilding of our economy, then it only stands to reason that we've got to invest in those areas and make sure that they've got everything that they need to be able to do their work. And when I say invest also, it's not always just money from the government to an organization. It's things like I made sure to be part of the Finance and Economic Recovery Committee. It sort of came together near the end of the first wave, or peak of the first wave, and nearing the end. We listened to over 600 hours of communities talking to us about what they needed and the impact of COVID and the pandemic on their various industries and sectors. One of the big things that we heard was that certain sectors like arts and culture and such that would have been hugely impacted when everything shut down initially weren't getting enough information about health and safety protocols in order for them to start back when the province started to open up. And so one of the things that the investment in the arts and culture area included was getting health and safety information faster. That's an investment in the sector because it allows them to do their work. And so I think it's really important, again, for us to recognize if you start off with this is a powerful part of the arts and culture sector, it's a powerful driver for the economy, it's a powerful healer for people and communities, then everything that they need so that they can do their work has to be put on the front burner as opposed to the back burner, which is how we've often seen investment in the arts. And so I think now is this opportunity in the midst of chaos, and it's hard to, we've had a lot of loss during the pandemic, a lot of loss and a lot of healing that has to happen. But part of that path to healing can be recognizing that we need alternative ways of telling these stories and supporting folks. And the investment to make that happen is going to be part of our healing journey, both healing of the economy and healing of our communities as we navigate this end of the pandemic, we hope.
We hope, yeah. Dr. Lindo, is there anything else as an advice or suggestion that you would like to share with us in Persian Awards?
The only thing that I would like to share at the end of all of this is first, gratitude. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And second, I hope that you recognize how powerful and important you are. To all of the volunteers and to all of the folks that were nominated and to all of the artists that are out there that were part of this entire process, I hope that you recognize that you are valued and you are seen and you are integral to everything that makes our communities move and grow and heal in the midst of all that we've been through in the last few years. And if there is ever anything that you need, you know where to find me, and I will be there. I will be there to advocate.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. This is Mojdeh from Persian Awards with Dr. Lindo from Ontario. It was really an honor to speaking with you, Dr. Lindo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.